Each country has its rich history, and every citizen of a given country should know something about the history of its own homeland. But when we think of the history of other countries, we very often think of very important events. We think of the history of some countries through the perspective of those events which shaped the history of the entire world. So, from my own perspective, when I think of the history of England and of the British Isles in general, I think of the First World War, the Second World War. I think about all the struggle, all the battles fought between the French and the English during the 100 Years' War, during the French and Indian War, during several other battles and wars. I think of the Battle of Hastings. I think also about the moments when the British Islands were taken by the Romans. But there are a lot of other events which I'm totally unaware of. And the history between the fall of Roman Britain and the Battle of Hastings is something which is a total mystery for me. This is why, with a great pleasure and with great anxiety, I was waiting for the new project launched by PHALANX. This project is called Bretwalda, and it is set in the late 8th century. Hello, this is Michel Sorbet, and this is a new episode of Wojennik TV. Today I am taking you to a trip to England, or to be precise to the British Islands, because I would like to show you the review of a prototype which at the moment, at this time, is still fighting on GameFound to be founded. Well, it's actually already funded, but it is fighting to accumulate the biggest possible amount of funds. This project is Bretwalda. Bretwalda is a game which will be released by PHALANX somewhere in 2023. It is a game for 1 to 4 players aged 14 or higher, and the time of a single game should be somewhere around 2 hours. This game was designed by Lev Soloviev, who not only created the core mechanics of Bretwalda, he is also the one who has done all the artwork. The game is set in the late 8th century, when the King of Mercia, one of the biggest kingdoms of England, dies. At the time, there were 7 major kingdoms in England, and during the game we will take control of one of those kingdoms in order to become the new Bretwalda, the king among others. We will try to secure new territory, we will try to recruit new troops, to defeat enemies in the battlefield, to develop our kingdom in terms of both economical as well as technological elements. But at the same time, we will be not only fighting internal enemies. New enemies will appear. Those enemies will be Danish troops landing in different parts of England and pillaging and destroying what players will be building during the game. In this video, I would like to show you how the prototype version of Bretwalda looks. I would like to briefly explain how it works, what are its basic mechanics, and at the end, I would like to share with you my final thoughts concerning this project. Now, this deserves to be underlined once more. This is the review of the prototype version, which means that both in terms of what I will be showing, as well as in terms of what I will be explaining, things can become different when it comes to the final product released by PHALANX after the campaign is closed. I know that the rules still evolve. The core should remain the same, but some minor changes, maybe some bigger changes if due to testing, if due to play testing, this is something which should be done, will be applied. But in my belief, the core mechanics will still remain the same as shown in this video. So without further ado, let's take a look at how Bretwalda looks and how it works. Here is a brief look at Bretwalda. As you can see, the game is extremely original in terms of how it looks. The map resembles a small piece of art, as you can see, in contrast to many other games, to any other war games or games in which we fight for territory. The map itself is stylized in such a way that when looking at it, we instantly think of the Middle Ages, of some medieval artwork. And this doesn't concern only the board, because if we take a look at the cards, for instance, at the back of the cards, or even at how the cards look, you can see that this style is omnipresent in this game. So when looking at Bretwalda, we will instantly think, wow, this is beautiful, this is something which reminds me of the Middle Ages, and this is just what the author, what the company wanted to accomplish. Now, Bretwalda is a game in which we will be trying to become Bretwalda, so the most important ruler in England, by taking control of one of the four major kingdoms, opposed one against the other. As you can see, the four kingdoms start in distinctive places, and from those points of the island, they will try to secure new territory, they will try to repulse enemy attacks, to fight off Danes landing on the island and trying to pillage different regions. We will be building new buildings such as abbeys, such as harbors. We will be raising new armies. We will be trying also to accomplish some missions, which in this game are called Chronicles. The main objective of Bretwalda is to accumulate a given number of points. Those points are called dalks. Those dalks can be secured in three different ways. Firstly, we can score a dalk, so a victory point, when taking control of a region, of a territory, where such a dalk is located. Those dalks are placed at the game start, so from the beginning we know which territories are granting victory points. Such victory points are possessed by a player only when they control the region associated to the corresponding dalk. As soon as they lose control of such a region due to an enemy attack, due to a battle which was lost, they lose also the victory point and their opponent takes this victory point from them. The second way to score victory points, so dalks, is to accomplish Chronicles. We have a dedicated deck of cards called the Chronicle deck, and each player at the start of the game will receive 2 cards from this deck. Those Chronicles have information concerning how to score the dalk corresponding to this Chronicle. For instance, when having the card No Mercy, we have to destroy 4 enemy units in one battle. If we have Swift Offensive, we have to gain control of 3 opponent-controlled areas in one movement action. So each Chronicle will work in a different way. Some of them are easier, some of them are harder to achieve. I will be talking about it a little bit later. But if you happen to have Chronicle cards which in your opinion are too difficult to accomplish, you can always draw new Chronicle cards at the end of each season and you can replace the ones that you have. But you cannot have more than 2 such cards in a given moment, and you cannot score more than 2 Chronicle cards during the entire game. So those will be a source of dalks, but only up to 2 points. The other points, well, you have to gain it in other ways. I have already spoken about dalks which are present on the board. The third way to score dalks is to build abbeys. Now, the abbey is one of the 4 different types of buildings which can be built in Bretwalda. Such a building is placed in a region that you control, and as long as you control this region, you have the opportunity of using the benefit of such a building. In the case of the abbey, it will grant you 1 additional coin when raising coins, but additionally, for each set of 3 abbeys that you control, you score 1 dalk. This dalk, as well as the dalks which are granted for controlling territory, is only applied if you control those abbeys. So if you lose control of one of the 3 abbeys, you lose also this Dalk. The first player to accumulate a given number of points depending on the number of players is declared the winner, and he becomes the new Bretwalda. What is extremely important is that the game ends immediately as soon as one of the players achieves this victory condition. So the game will not be played up until the end of a season. The other players will not have the opportunity to react. As soon as a player achieves victory, he wins instantly and the game ends. The game can end due to 3 different factors. The first one, as I mentioned a few moments ago, happens when one of the players accomplishes its objective in terms of accumulating the number of points needed to instantly win the game. The game ends in sudden death. The second way of ending the game is when one of the players loses all 3 ruler cards that he had from the start of the game, because each player receives at the start of the game a set of miniatures of 4 different types of units. Some of them will be placed onto the board, others will be placed to the reserve. He receives also a set of markers, a special board on which he will be placing his development tiles, and also a set of 3 ruler cards. Now, the ruler cards represent the ruler of the kingdom that you take control of, and during the game you will be always using only one of those cards. At the game start, you choose one of those 3 rulers. Each ruler has their own name, has there also a special capacity, a certain number of life points, a given movement factor, and also the information which type of die such a ruler uses in battle. Those rulers are also represented by miniatures. The most important miniature is your ruler miniature, which represents your current ruler. And this miniature will be placed to the board, will be treated just as every other unit, which means that such a unit can also be destroyed during a battle. If your ruler is killed in a battle, it is not only removed from the board, but you also lose your current ruler. And at that point, you have to choose another one from the ones that you have. If you happen to lose all your 3 rulers, the game also instantly stops, and the players count the number of Dalks currently in their possession, determining who becomes Bretwalda. Obviously, the player who lost all his 3 rulers is not taken into consideration during this final count. The third way in which the game can end is the end of the final round. During the game, we will be playing a maximum of 12 rounds, which will be tracked on a special track, and during each turn, during each round, we will be playing one of the seasons. In the game, we have 4 seasons, as you might expect. We have spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And during each turn, we will be drawing at the start of the turn 1 card from the corresponding deck. All those cards will indicate what happens in a given season. In spring, no additional events, but an information which tells you what specific things will happen during this season. In summer, we will be also having a specific information, but additionally, we have the information that the Danes will arrive. Danes always arrive onto the board in summer. In autumn, we also have a special event, and additionally, all the Danes and neutrals can move. So the movement of those units will happen in autumn, and finally, on winter, a special event happens and we have to feed all our units. Additionally, we cannot collect food because in the game we will be building armies, we will be moving those armies, battling our opponents, but those armies will require some food because in the game we will be collecting food and money. Money will be used to raise new troops, to build new buildings, to develop new development tiles, and to bribe neutral and Danish units, whereas food will be used to feed your troops present on the board. If you are unable to feed those troops, they will be removed from the board. Now, how a turn of Bretwalda looks. Firstly, we uncover the card from the top of the corresponding deck, which corresponds to the place where the current, where the round token is placed. So, for instance, if we are playing a spring turn, we will draw a card from the spring deck. If we play a summer turn, we will be drawing a card from the summer deck. In spring, nothing additional happens, but in summer, Danes arrive. And this is the first moment when players will have to try to bribe, or rather will have to try to overcome their opponents and to control to some extent where the Danes will land. Each player at this point will have the opportunity to use some of his gold which they have in the reserve, and they will try to take part in an auction in which all the players will compare the number of gold that they want to spend. The player who spends the most number of coins has the opportunity of drawing a certain amount of Danish cards and choosing one, and he will be able to choose one of those cards indicating where the Danes will land in England. So, for instance, if he wants the Danes to land somewhere very far from his own possessions, from his own territory, he can choose a territory which is closer to enemy cities, and by doing so he will also cause those Danish units to land sometimes into enemy territory, causing some disaster, causing the necessity of reacting to such an invasion by the opposing players. So at this point, Danes will land, and if they manage to land, they will also start pillaging the surrounding areas. Pillaged regions cannot be used to produce food nor gold. Those units will then be moved, but during autumn turns. So when autumn arrives, all Danes and all neutral units can move, and those units will be moved by the players. Again, all players will spend a certain amount of gold in order to move, to firstly activate and then to move and to resolve battles with neutral and Danish units. In the game, we have 4 different types, or even 5 different types of units. We have 4 land units and one sea unit. The land units are the churls, which are small units. They do not cost a lot, but they also are very weak in battle. Then we have the thanes, which are bigger, which are stronger, but again they are not the most powerful units. The most powerful units is without any doubt the Ealdorman, which, as you can see, is bigger from his fellows. He is the strongest one, and but unfortunately also costs the most to recruit. Finally, as mentioned earlier, we have also 1 ruler unit per player, who also is extremely powerful, but as mentioned earlier, if you lose such a unit, the consequences might be very grave for you. So those are the land units. Additionally, we have neutral units, which also come in 3 different types. So we do have the churls, we have the thanes, and also the Ealdormen. We have also the Danish units. As you can see, the Danish units are a different type of unit, although they work in a very similar way to the neutral units. Finally, we have also the sea units. Each player can build ships in order to transport his troops, in order to take control also of the islands which are part of the playing area. Danes arrive on Drakars, which also can be placed in sea areas, and they can participate in battles against ships controlled by human players. So when the neutral are to be moved, each player spends a certain amount of gold, and starting from the player who spent the most number of gold, we can activate enemy troops, move them, and then resolve battles. Activating units requires us to spend money. Depending on the type of unit that you want to move, the price will be different. Of course, the units which are the strongest, so the aldermen, will require you to spend the biggest amount of coins. After moving those units, we resolve battles. Whenever units from two different players or neutral units and units of a player end their movement on the same space, a battle is resolved. In Bretwalda, movement is quite straightforward. As you can see, we have different kinds of terrain. We have cities which are indicated by a shield. We have villages, and we have also capital cities, which are the ones where the players start the game, which are their major cities. Additionally, we have some harbors, which are the places where we can build additional ships and which can also secure our ships if we do not want to keep them in the sea. When it comes to movement, we will be paying a certain amount of movement points, and this depends on the type of border between regions. We can have regions or territories which are linked by roads. This movement is obviously very quick. If such a road doesn't exist between territories, you have to spend more points. Units can be also moved through sea using your ships. Now, when units end the movement in the same region, a battle is resolved, and the battle is resolved using dice. In the game, we have different types of dice, starting from the weakest one, which is the white die, as you can see, with some blank faces, with some additional ones. We have the swords indicating damage inflicted, and we have shields indicating damage reduced. Then we have the orange dice, where, as you can see, more symbols appear, and finally the red dice, which are the strongest ones, which allow you to score a lot of damage. We have also two special gray dice, which are defensive dice used only when defending a city area. Each unit uses a specific type of die, and we roll all those dice, comparing the results. During the battle and also after damage resolution, we can use special kingdom cards, because we have also a special deck of kingdom cards, and most of them will work during battle, or for instance after winning a battle, after a battle we lose, before a battle. In general, cards will tell you when they can be played, and they can also change the influence of a battle. Additionally, you can use those cards in order to obtain one hit when you want to increase the number of hits obtained by the dice that you rolled. A battle can last up to 2 rounds, after which we declare the winner. If there are still units from two sides, it's the defender who wins the battle and the attacker has to retreat. Otherwise, if only one side remains, it takes control of the territory. If it has any dogs, immediately scoring a victory point and reducing this point from the ones that the opponent had. During the game, we will be playing our turns in clockwise order or in counterclockwise order. The direction will be decided by the player who had the biggest number of dogs at the end of the previous turn. Such a player is called the pretender. He receives a special token which indicates that he is the current pretender. The pretender, as you can see, can decide of the direction in which we will be playing. He also has the opportunity of breaking ties, of deciding who wins ties. The downside of being the pretender is that during both Danish and neutral units movement, as well as when Danish troops land, he doesn't receive any additional gold in order to participate in the competition between players, because at that point each player who has fewer dogs from the pretender receives a certain number of so-called treasury gold, which can be used in order to increase the number of gold that such a player spends in order to win the competition. The actions which all the players can take during the turn are indicated on the player aid, and they have also their corresponding tokens which are placed onto the player's board. Those actions are the third action, which allows you to recruit new units. By spending gold, you can buy new units, place them onto the board. We have the movement action, which, as explained earlier allows you to move your units through different spaces and to initiate battles. We have the collection action, which allows you to gain gold for the territories that you control, which produce gold and also produce food, which is produced by territories or regions where a food icon is present. And finally, we have the development action, which has a double purpose. Firstly, you can build buildings, as mentioned earlier, for instance, Abbeys, and you can place them onto the board by spending gold. But secondly, you can also develop your kingdom by placing development tiles. We have 4 different colors of development tiles. In each color we have a set of 3 tiles, but during the game you will be able only to place 2 of them on your kingdom board, which means that you will have to choose from the 3 tiles. 1 of them will not be used, and those development tiles will grant you a specific benefit. For instance, the Frankish builders allow you to build any number of buildings in one action, because normally you can build only 1 building. So having such a development tile grants you an additional benefit. Additionally, each kingdom has its own special ability, which is also printed onto the kingdom's tiles. So during each turn, each player will take not more than 2 actions, and after resolving all those actions, a round ends. We check who the new pretender is. Each player can draw a new Chronicle card from the deck in order to decide if he wants to keep those that he already had, or maybe replace it with the one drawn. And then we start a new turn by drawing a new card from the corresponding season deck. We play until the moment the game ends due to one of the conditions that I explained at the start of this part of the video. And that's pretty it when it comes to the basic rules of Bretwalda. Now, there are some other small additional rules, but I wouldn't like now to spend more time on explaining how the game works. I'd like to invite you to the final part of the video, during which I'd like to rather tell you what I think about this project, what I think are its strong, but also the weaker points. Bretwalda is an extremely interesting project, and because of several reasons. But the first thing which deserves and which should be underlined is the fact that this is a game covering a very interesting moment of English history. Now, we have a lot of games, we have a lot of war games covering history of England, which are focused, for instance, on the 100 Years' War, on all the French and English wars fought during the centuries. We have games covering the Battle of Hastings, but when we take a look at this specific period, at the time between the fall of Roman Britain and the Battle of Hastings, we come to a conclusion that we do not have a lot of titles covering this history. Now, this part of history, this doesn't mean that this is a dark black spot in history of England. Something existed at that time. We had a lot of interesting events, we had kingdoms, we had wars, but they are not very well known. So it is always nice, it is always refreshing to see a game which is focused on events which aren't such popular, such well known to the wide audience. Having said that, I think that this is one of those games which is something of a clear sign that the history of our world is such an entire one that we never stop learning. I personally love history. I like reading history books. I like some specific periods in history, both of Poland, of France, as of the entire world. But such games as Bretwalda always show to me that the history of all human kind is such a rich one that it is impossible to know everything. But it is also quite refreshing to always learn new things. Now, when speaking of Bretwalda as a product, as a game, firstly, I'd like to once more very strongly underline that this is a review of a prototype version. So what I am telling you today might not be the case when speaking of the final product, which will be released in some time. So I won't be focusing really a lot on specific mechanics. I will be telling a little bit about them, but I do have to keep in mind, and I want you also to be aware of the fact that the final product might differ from what I have showed today, what I am talking about today. So when speaking of Bretwalda, in terms of the things that I like, firstly, I have already said I like the setting, I like the idea, I like the fact that this is a game focused on events which weren't very often used in gaming, in wargaming neither. Secondly, what I really like is the visual aspect of Bretwalda, because Bretwalda is a small piece of art. Starting from the board, which compared to other wargames is a very different one. It is still an area control game, without any doubt, but the areas, the way that the board is presented, the graphics used instantly make you think of something medieval. And this is great because the climate of the game, the feeling of playing Bretwalda, is significantly increased due to the artwork, due to the style, even due to the fonts used on cards. This is a great association of the theme and of the artwork, which are very well linked together. Thirdly, what I really like is the fact that Bretwalda is also an interesting game when we take a closer look at the mechanics. Now, Bretwalda isn't an overly complicated game, which is a good thing, because it is a game which will not suit only wargamers, it will not only suit Euro players, it will suit almost everyone. Why? Well, because even if we have some wargaming elements in Bretwalda, this is still a game in which many things were streamlined, were designed in such a way that they are not overly complicated. We do not have tons of exceptions, we do not have a lot of ambiguous rules, which would be there only in order to increase the historical feeling. We have a lot of historical flavor in the game, and it is a good thing that the author, that the company decided not to include even more, only to make it more historical, but by doing so, by reducing playability. Bretwalda can be easily played under 2 hours. In a group of experienced players, it can be even ended in 1.5 hours. So this is not a long game to play. This is not a long game to explain. Maybe it's a little bit long to set due to all the components, due maybe to the diversity of them and the fact that at the beginning you do have to accommodate with all the things that you have at your disposal. But even so, it is still a game very enjoyable in terms of the time that you have to spend, that you have to invest in order to fully enjoy it. When speaking of the mechanics and of the correlation between the mechanics and the theme, I said that I enjoy and I appreciate the fact that the game is not overly complicated, but still we have a lot of decisions in the game. So we will be deciding which of the 4 actions to use in our turn. We will be deciding where to expand, we'll be deciding where to keep our forces, from where we want to launch offensives, when we want to defend, where we want to defend, where we want to place buildings, what technologies do we want to invest in. So a lot of decisions and only 12 rounds. In each round only 2 actions, which means that during the entire game we will be playing only 24 actions. This means that a single round of Bretwalda will not be very long to play. I like the fact that among those actions we have to choose from 4, but we use only 2. So as you can see, we do not have a lot of different actions, only 4 of them, but very logical ones, very clear ones, and very easily telling you what is the outcome of those actions. In some games, For instance, in Feudum, we have tons of actions, and at first glance, you do not see what actually you can accomplish using them. In Bretwalda, it's really straightforward. Movement means movement and battling. Development means putting buildings onto the board or placing development tiles onto your kingdom boards. Third, you recruit units. And finally, we have the fourth action, which will be the action of taking resources. So all those actions are really very easy to grasp, and you instantly know what is their outcome, what is the impact of them when you take those actions. Additionally, what deserves to be said is the fact that we do have diverse methods, or rather ways, of scoring victory points, darks. This is also something which I really like in the game, because you do not only want to take control of territory, you have to secure this territory, because points can be lost if you lose territory. Secondly, you can also build abbeys, which grant you additional points, and additionally, you can also accomplish Chronicles, which grant you additional points. Of course, you cannot win only by building abbeys and accomplishing Chronicles, because, for instance, for Chronicles, you can have only 2 points at maximum. But those are also very important sources of victory points. So knowing when to score, how to score, is also extremely important. In Bretwalda, it's interesting that sometimes it is to your benefit not to be the leader. Of course, being the pretendant gives you some advantages, but at most times people will be trying to limit your expansion, will try to make some sort of temporary alliances in order to stop you in your advance. So it is even at your benefit to be somewhere around second, third place at most of the game, in order to attack at a very specific time and get the points needed to win. Now, in terms of winning, Bretwalda is different from the majority of games in which we have to accumulate a certain number of points, because the game immediately stops at the moment when one of the players reaches the given amount of points. In most games where we have to accumulate a certain number of points, if a player accomplishes this objective, the other players can still play to the end of the turn and try to get points by themselves, or maybe reduce the number of points that their opponent has. In Bretwalda, it works differently. And to be frank, after my first play, I was quite, let's use the correct word, I didn't know what to know about this solution. I didn't thought that this was a bad idea. I wasn't absolutely sure that this was the correct one neither. So I had somewhat of an ambiguous situation in which I wasn't sure what to think about it. But after thinking about it a little bit more, I think that the decision by the designer, by the company, of making the game to be stopped immediately when one of the players reaches the required number of points is a good one. And it really works fine, because in the standard mode, when players have the opportunity to react, can end their turn, we would in most cases see scenarios in which all the players would attack jointly the player who scored the points. Here in Bretwalda, you do have to react earlier. And I like this fact, because when you think about it, you do have to look carefully at what is happening on the board during the entire game. You have to constantly analyze which player has what number of darks and what is his potential to receive additional ones. So you do have to react earlier before it is too late. And I like this approach, because it makes you even think more during the game. It makes you more strategically approach the game during the entire play. And I think it's a better solution than giving players then a final opportunity of kicking the leader. You have to do it earlier. When talking about kicking the leader, during the game we will be sometimes, as I said a few moments ago, forming temporary alliances. We will be talking a lot during the game, we will be negotiating, and this is another aspect of Bretwalda which I really like. The fact that in 2 moments of at 2 moments of specific rounds, during summer and during autumn, we will be auctioning the privilege of landing Danes, of moving neutral units, means that there will be rivalry between the players and there will be negotiation between players. Sometimes we will be, for instance, negotiating, saying, hey, take this territory, I will take this, let's not attack each other in this region, let's focus on taking control over lands. Let's cooperate because we still have the weakest possibilities, but joining forces we can stand together against our enemies. And sometimes it works well. On other occasions, you will try to fool your opponents, telling them that you are in a very bad situation, that you do not want to expand. In reality, having accomplished already 1 or 2 Chronicles and having the potential to secure even more docks. So Bretwalda won't be played only on the board. It's not a very flat game. It's a game which really incites such situations in which a lot of negotiation will be taking place, in which a lot of discussion will be taking place, discussion which will have impact on the game. And I like such games in which diplomacy, in which negotiation is as much important as what is actually happening on the board. So those are the things which I really liked in Bretwalda, which I think are also the strongest elements of this project. There are also some things which I liked less, and I'd like now to tell you a few words about what was it. Firstly, in terms of what we receive in the box, I said that the artwork of the game is gorgeous. It is a very original game, it is a very pretty game in terms of how it looks, but at the same time, this visual aspect makes the game a little bit more difficult to play. Why? Well, because, for instance, when you take a look at the different regions, at the different territories, you can clearly see that we do have to distinguish the symbols of food, of money. You have to see that a territory is a city due to the shield printed on the territory. But if you place 4 miniatures into this very small region at most times, you can make the situation on the board very unclear. It becomes very crowded and sometimes it's difficult to see, it's difficult to tell what kind of territory do we have. Do I have a foot symbol on this region? Oh, it was covered by a shield. Yes, I do have one. Is it a city? Oh yes, in fact it's a city. It was covered by my ruler. And such situations will occur during the game. So maybe differentiating the different type of regions in a different way than only printing the small food or maybe the small shield would be a good idea. Maybe some coloristic aspects would be welcome. I do not know. During my plays it was sometimes very crowded and it was a thing which was at times very confusing. The second thing concerns the kingdom cards, where the symbols of, not the kingdom cards, the cards that you use to resolve battles, the cards that you use between battles and during your turn. On those cards we have the small sword symbol and the small coin symbol printed on the left bottom corner of the card. Now those symbols are really small and it's very easy to forget them. It's even possible to not see them due to their small size. So they should be definitely much more visible on the cards in order to fully use their capabilities and the possibilities of using the cards in different ways. The third thing, which in terms of this version of the game, of the prototype which I received, is, in my opinion, problematic, is the fact that the Chronicle cards, so de facto the possibilities of gaining additional points, are of a very different difficulty. Some of them are extremely easy to accomplish, or rather easy to accomplish, maybe not extremely easy. Others are very hard. So when drawing 2 Chronicle cards at the game start, you can have a set of very difficult missions, and you can also grab a set of ones that you can accomplish quite easily. Of course, you can draw new Chronicle cards at the end of the round. You can discard the ones that you judge are too difficult, but still having a set of very easy Chronicles to accomplish from the game start gives you a certain edge. And I believe that the leveling of the difficulty of the Chronicles should be something that the designer and the company should invest their time in. Finally, I think that the game, although very original in terms of how it looks, is still a game which isn't extremely original in terms of the mechanics used. Of course, the mechanics work fine. I said that it is a game very streamlined. It is a game in which theme and mechanics are well linked together. I do not take this back, but even so, when judging the games in terms of how novel it is, how new it is, how original it is in terms of mechanic, I cannot find anything very spectacular, something which would say, wow, Bretwalda is a game which can be very innovative, which will show a new path in wargaming. Obviously, or of course, we do not have a lot of such games, but sometimes when judging a project, when looking at a project, we are searching for something very original, very exceptional in terms of how the game works. In Bretwalda, we have mechanics which we can clearly see also in other games. So we have some area control elements, we have some elements concerning drafting armies, resolving battles using dice. We have the element of feeding your units during each winter, which is taken, for instance, from Shogun. So we have a lot of elements which we can clearly see that they were taken from other games. They work really fine, but they aren't very, very original. The thing which makes Bretwalda really unique is not its mechanical part, it's rather its visual part and its setting. So even though the game is not mechanically brilliant, it is still something really exceptional and something really unique due to the theme and due to the artwork, which is really exceptional, which makes the game shine among others. So judging the game based on its innovative aspect, on the way that it will potentially change gaming or maybe create new mechanics which will be used in other games by other designers, I must say that this is not the case. But even so, Bretwalda is such a unique game when you think of it, when you think of its artwork, of its visual aspect, that there is still this element of uniqueness in it, which makes you instantly think of this game and which will make you remember this project. And this is also something extremely important. Concluding all this, I think that Bretwalda is an interesting project, a project which is extremely pretty, which is extremely original in terms of its artwork, a project which covers an interesting period of the history of England, a period which is almost entirely unknown to people who are not familiar with history of England, a game using interesting streamlined mechanics, allowing you to recruit units, to develop your empire by choosing different technologies in order to obtain some benefits, in which you can build buildings, a game which has a high replay value, a game which can be quite easily explained, which can be played in under 2 hours. At the same time, a game which is not extremely original in terms of the mechanics used, a game which still needs to be balanced, which still needs to be developed in order to become a fully enjoyable and good working, fully enjoyable project, fully enjoyable game, and good and well working machine. Because as in the case of almost every prototype, the constant development of the engine is something which must be done up to a point where you are absolutely certain that the project is fully developed game. Here in Bretwalda, I still have the feeling that there are some things which can be done even to which can be done to make the game even better. If you're interested by this period, if you're interested in games with fantastic artwork, Bretwalda might be an interesting choice for you. The game, at the moment when this video is released, is still on GameFound, so you can take a look at it. I will leave the link to the GameFound project, to the GameFound project in the description of this video. This was the review of the prototype version of Bretwalda, which will be released by PHALANX. Thank you a lot for watching this video. I invite you also to take a look at my other videos on Wojennik TV and also to take a look at my Facebook and Instagram accounts. Have a terrific day and see you next time.